Hello and welcome to Tarot and Attachment. My name is Erin Smith and I am an associate marriage and family therapist in the state of California. For those of you who don't know me, I started this channel to talk about the research that I did for my thesis, where I was looking at attachment theory through the lens of the archetypes that are presented in tarot. And, correlating that with this Jungian idea of exploring archetypes for the sake of healing or integration, looking at the archetypes as parts of ourselves and getting to know them and investigating them deeply so that we can know ourselves more completely and awaken those energies that have been exiled through trauma. And specifically, my area of interest is attachment wounding. So the trauma that children incur when they're not raised in households that meet their needs in a good enough way. And the resulting conditions of that, how we as adults carry that early childhood wounding forward, largely in unconscious ways. It comes out a lot in the way that we have relationships as adults. It also comes out in regard to our sense of self, so, self-esteem, disturbances. So I was going through the news, as we do these days, and looking at all the many things to be upset about. And I came across a story. Um, I don't know why well, I do know why this makes me so sad. All the things that are going on that are horrifically sad. This one really struck a chord in me. But it was an order to start logging public lands. They are now taking public lands, national parks, and also indigenous land, and they are opening it up for logging. So there is an attempt now to destroy our national forests. And I'm going to get personal for a moment. One of the reasons why I took such an interest in attachment theory in my professional life, in my scholarly life, is that I grew up in an extraordinarily dysfunctional household. And I suffered as a child. And in retrospect, one of the things that helped me the most as a child, having no allies in my family of origin, was to go into the woods. When I was a child, I would seek comfort in nature. We happened to live in an undeveloped part of Austin, Texas, where you would walk out the door and you would be in the middle of pristine forest. There was like a family of deer that would come through our backyard on a regular basis. And I would wander into the woods and spend the majority of my day amongst the trees. And I think of those beings as having nurtured me in ways that I desperately needed and wasn't getting at home. So the thought of destroying these national forests, cutting down these trees, eradicating the consciousness of these beings that provide us oxygen, shade, they cool our planet, they store carbon. It just deeply distressed me. So I do what I do in these circumstances. I seek insight from the cards. So usually, I'll do a reading on here for you guys by pulling the cards in front of you. But I just wanted to share with you the cards that came up in response to my question, what can be done to protect the trees? And I want to take you through a little a meditation. I've been doing meditations on some of the cards that have been coming up on a regular basis, and some of the cards that came up in this poll are ones that we've seen many times previously. So the first card that I pulled was the Devil, and this guy has been showing up in readings that I've been doing for many, many months now. And the next card that I pulled is the Moon. And these cards are significant. They are both cards that I highlight in my thesis that are indicative of attachment wounding. The Moon is sort of like a general reference to attachment wounding, and I associate the Devil with disorganized attachment, and I'll talk about that. Let's start with the Moon. The Moon is about things we keep hidden from ourselves, things that are too painful or too uncomfortable to look at in the light of day, and so it gets buried in the unconscious. It's too painful to reconcile in our conscious minds, and so it gets exiled, it gets disowned in an attempt to move beyond it. But instead, what happens is that this disowned material is this unconscious motivation for all the actions that we take out in the world. It's an unresolved wound because it has gone unacknowledged. The reason that I associate the Moon with early childhood wounding is that at the time in our lives when attachment is being developed, attachment is simply a biological imperative. We need to attach to our primary caregivers because as infants, we are completely dependent on them for our survival. Because an infant can do nothing on its own. It can't feed itself, it can't clothe itself or keep itself warm. It can't, it'll lie in its own feces unless somebody comes to tend to it. And it also needs attunement, connection. In order to develop a sense of self, it has to be accurately mirrored by primary caregivers. This is a big one. A lot of times people don't understand how important sensitive attunement is. We don't develop the ability to self-soothe unless we are co-regulated by primary caregivers. If we are experiencing some distress without comfort and soothing, then we have no way of reconciling that intense emotional expression. If you cry and cry and cry and nobody comes, you do stop crying eventually. And it's not because you figured out a way to make yourself feel better. It's that the pain and distress of unresolved discomfort is so terrifying. I mean, it is literally registering in the central nervous system of the infant as a death threat. That is so overwhelmingly distressing that the only way that they can work that through is to suppress awareness of the need and the emotion. So in this way, a lot of times parents will say like, oh, you were such a good kid, you never cried. So I would let you cry it out in your crib and then you just stopped crying. Like that makes you a good kid. That's actually a kid who is in extreme distress. And that somatic experience of I'm going to die, it gets buried in the unconscious. So all of this is happening around 6 to 18 months of age. That's when we are developing our attachment strategy to our primary caregivers. We cultivate automatic behaviors to try to elicit closeness. So if your caregiver gets unnecessarily disturbed by your crying, then you suppress awareness of your crying. If they only respond to you when you're really cute and performing correctly, then you learn to put out the kind of behavior that is going to most likely get your needs met. And so what you do is then internalize this sense of like, in order for me to be loved, I have to perform the way that they want me to. All of these behaviors that are called that develop out of the conditions that you're raised within, it's not a conscious choice. At the time that we're developing these behaviors, we are operating out of implicit memory, which is basically you're feeling everything. It's emotions, it's somatic sensations in the body. That is how you're experiencing the world. Implicit memory predates autobiographical memory, which is this narrative sense of the world and self. It starts to develop around the age of 4, which is around the time that children start to speak. So that makes sense, right? We develop a narrative sense of self. This is me. I like to draw. I like horses. You don't have that conception of self before you have words to communicate that, both to others and to yourself. So this is why I associate the moon with early childhood wounding, because it is this unconscious sense of who we are and whether the world is a safe place that will provide for us adequately. And when we have hidden these parts of ourselves from ourselves, then we are sort of wandering around in the dark. We are in this sort of murky, unconscious way of dealing with material in the world. And one of the things that attachment research has shown us is that it is very common for children who grow into adolescents and adults to replicate the relational dynamics that they experienced in their family of origin with their primary relationships. So if you had dismissing parents, you are attracted to dismissing partners. And again, this is not a conscious choice. It's just kind of how we're hardwired. We go towards the familiar. And that's great. If you grew up in a household of secure attachment, it means you're going to gravitate towards other people who are expressing that sense of security. And generally speaking, that creates, collaborative partnerships, people who are able to attune to one another and be empathetic and responsive in authentic ways to one another's needs. It's the best. It's what we're all looking for. But if those were not the conditions in which you were raised, unfortunately, you are unconsciously replicating those patterns until we are able to bring that material up into conscious awareness and feel the feelings, experience the grief and the sadness that comes from having not gotten your needs met in a good enough way. So that brings us to the devil. The reason that I associate the devil with disorganized attachment is that the devil has a lot to do with disassociation, with addictions. Adults who have a disorganized attachment strategy often report growing up in a household where one or more parents had a substance use issue. Disorganized attachment is also associated with extreme abuse. or neglect. Disorganized attachment is the result of having the source of comfort also be the source of fear. So again, as children, we are hardwired to cling to our parents, our caregivers for safety and security, for comfort and soothing. But when they are the ones who are enacting erratic, unpredictable, violent, or frightening ways of being, our impulse to go to them for comfort is interrupted by this horrific knowledge that that person may actually be the one who is harming us. And it's very hard to resolve on, again, on a somatic emotional level. And the reason they call it disorganized is that sometimes the child freezes, sometimes they completely shut down, sometimes they don't appear to be present in the moment. Sometimes they cry and are inconsolable, and nothing that is done can help them come back into a state of regulation. Sometimes they're dismissing. It sort of looks like their behavior is all over the map. And, as we also know from the research, when you grow up in households of abuse, neglect, substance use, again, these are behaviors that often get replicated in adulthood. Many people who go on to be abusers were abused themselves. Many people who develop a dependency on drugs and alcohol come from households where that was modeled to them. And, I think it's, specifically from coming from someone, I myself am 25 years sober. So I grew up in a household where my father was a heavy drinker and have many multiple generations, both my parents' parents. There was significant alcohol use going on in the home. So it's this intergenerational wounding around substances. And it's important to acknowledge that, again, if you have no means of self-regulation, if that was never modeled to you, if you were never soothed and therefore you don't know how to self-soothe, I do want to just suggest that drugs and alcohol are a pretty great way to quell the pain. They do their job. They are a disassociative mechanism. They are able to shift your internal state pretty immediately. Of course, that being used as a coping mechanism often creates more problems than it's solving. I mean, that was certainly true for me, where the solution became the bigger problem. But again, it's like what we're looking at in terms of this archetype, the devil. And, look at him. He's sort of a humanoid figure. He has sort of the body of a man, the head of a goat-ish figure, the furry legs, like the feet of a chicken. This is a fractured being. This is a being made up of disparate parts, rendered part human, part beast. There isn't one organized expression of this being, similar to disorganized attachment. And this figure is looming over this primordial man and woman. And you can see there's sort of this pointing to them being in the throes of an addiction as well. The woman has this tail of grapes, signifying wine, spirits. And the male has the tail of fire, being in the throes of a passion, an insatiable passion. And they too are sprouting these horns. They have been taken over by these primal instincts that are driving them to act in ways that maybe go against the finer connective ways that we as human beings find solace in one another. And of course, they are chained at the feet of this bestial figure, implying this hierarchical power structure, that they are subordinate, that they are at the mercy of this figure, that they have been rendered powerless. These are all themes that we talk about a lot in programs of recovery, being powerless over alcohol, and that our lives have become unmanageable. So the devil is about people, places, and things to which we give our power away. And we do it largely in situations where there is a deep unconscious wound that we're operating out of. In and of myself, I'm not enough. I need something outside of myself to fix me or save me or complete me. Again, this orientation happens when we don't develop a sense of self that is secure, where we don't have the experience early on in life that the world is meeting our needs. We become enslaved to this idea that I must have something outside of myself to be happy, healthy, and whole. And of course, it's not always about substances. You know, it could easily be, I am powerless and I need some big figurehead to come and save me, some dictatorial person to take charge and make things happen because I myself am so powerless. You know, it can be like, I can't be happy until I have this amount of money in the bank and I need more and more and more. It's never enough. There's a sense of it never being enough. I am never safe. I am always rendered powerless over this thing outside of me that I think I need in order to thrive. Okay, so I want to show you something. Take a look at this card. Look at those chains around their necks. At first glance, it looks like they are disempowered, but in fact, those chains are relatively loose. It does appear that if they were to recognize their immediate state of being, that they would be able to lift those chains right off. So this card is also implying that there's some kind of learned helplessness here at play, that our cognitive sense of our own reality has been impeded, that we aren't seeing things clearly. We're somewhat complicit in these circumstances of authoritarianism and disempowerment, that we have more power than we think we do. And if we are to see things from that perspective, then these chains lift right off. The devil is always imploring us to take our power back, that nothing out there is going to fix it for us, that if we find this sense of internal wholeness and unity amongst one another, that is the very thing that restores us to our own personal power. It breaks those chains. It negates this hierarchical experience. So then, look at this. I'm telling you, the tarot is an amazing tool for insight. Here we have the Lovers. In my thesis, I talk about how the Lovers is the medicine to heal the attachment disturbance of the devil. I talk about how meditating on this archetype of the lovers, and look at the lovers, this is what they look like when they've been freed from the chains of bondage. It is unity and wholeness. It is the understanding that when we come together in a state of balance, in perfect collaboration between the masculine and feminine energies, feminine energy being that which receives, it's receptive, it holds space for something to grow to full fruition. It's nurturance, attunement, attentiveness. And the masculine is an externalized version of will. It is the ability to take action, to assert oneself out in the world in order to make something happen. And we need both of these energies in order to create new life, both within ourselves and in our relationships out in the world. We need the ability to be self-reflective, to pause, to take in information and to sit with it and see who we are and what our values are. And then once we know that, once we have fostered that seed of passion, then we can go out in the world and implement it and take action. And again, it's always about this beautiful exchange of giving and receiving. The meditation here is to take our power back and to see that when we are unified, when we are aligned with our own internal values, then we can take good action out in the world and we can bring down these systems of oppression that are harming people, that are killing people, both overtly and indirectly. You know, when you dismantle systems that supply financial assistance to populations of people who are suffering, you're killing them. When you are supplying bombs to go and commit genocide in other countries, you are killing people. When you are taking away the financial foundation of people's retirement and creating systems of healthcare that are prohibitively expensive, you are killing people. When you are buying up with private equities, allowing private equity to buy up all single family homes and continuing to raise prices beyond what people can afford to pay, you are killing people. So in this way, death is implying that there is a system that is no longer sustainable. Maybe it never was. I would go so far as to say it never was. But it has been getting progressively worse as more of the wealth and resources have been hoarded at the top. And so it's time to let the system die. And the system will die when we take our power back. So the work to be done is to heal the attachment wounding. And I've said it before, I believe that what we are looking at in society, this inability to care for others, including the trees, including the animals, including the water systems, that this is a breakdown of attunement. That the people making these decisions that are ultimately so destructive for this ecosystem are suffering from an attachment wound. And that in some misguided way, some unconscious way, they believe that amassing power is going to fix them. And in fact, it is just perpetuating this destruction. And the answer is unification. to care for all living beings equally, to recognize that when I tend to you, I am tending to myself. When I'm harming you, I am harming myself. And that this is what needs to happen in order for us to tear down these old structures, in order to bring about a rebirth. Wow, that was Frida. Frida just let out some crazy scream. She's dreaming. So let's take a moment. Let's take a moment to meditate and to imagine this. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and come into a comfortable seated posture. And just settle into the surface beneath you. Maybe feel the pressure of your feet connecting to the ground. Maybe they're tucked underneath you, and just feel the points of contact between yourself and the surface beneath you. And just notice that in this moment, you are supported. You are safe to go inward and to connect deeply with these parts of yourself for the sake of healing and insight. And I want you to go within, and I want you to feel into the sensation of being oppressed. Feel what it feels like when you imagine that you are not getting your needs met. And in fact, there is this feeling of being separated from the very things that you need in order to thrive. They are being willfully withheld from you. Notice this sensation. Maybe there's a tightness in your chest. Maybe there's a clenching of your jaw, a tightening of your throat. Maybe there's some roiling sensation in your belly. But I'm going to invite you to go within and contact within your own body and notice, get curious about these qualities of sensation. Feel into it. Be present with the sensation. There is a tendency when we contact sensations in the body that are particularly unpleasant to want to eject out of the experience. You may notice that you have racing thoughts when you bring awareness to the discomfort in the body. And it's okay if you notice some thoughts that are arising, even if they're loud or frenetic. Just notice the thoughts and then gently bring your attention back to these sensations in your body. A willingness to be with the discomfort within yourself is an act of loving kindness. You are defying your early experience of abandonment, the inability for your caregivers to soothe you in times of distress, and the wise part of you that is witnessing your internal experience is cultivating presence to be with that old part of you that feels like it's gonna die. And you are offering it this comfort, this willingness to be seen. You bearing witness and being with that discomfort may have an effect. Notice if the sensation gets louder or softer. Maybe it moves. Maybe you bring your awareness to tightness in the chest and it moves into your belly. And just create a spacious allowance for this energy to be wherever it is and however it needs to express. And stay with it. With loving kindness, you are bringing it up into conscious awareness. And now I want you to call into mind, I want you to give the discomfort in your body a form. And that form can take the archetypal presentation of that humanoid fractured demon, that figure that looms larger than life, that feels so oppressive. Give that discomfort the form. And imagine yourself now sitting in front of that demon. Again, the wise, whole part of yourself that is able to be with that demon without retreating, without shrinking away, without needing to control it or fix it or change it, but simply the intention of being with it. Sit across from it. Notice what's going on in your body when you're able to do that. And I want you to imagine that rather than it being bigger than you, that you are exactly the same size as this foreboding figure. And its attempts to menace you fall flat. You are just able to sit across from it and witness it. And imagine now even that the chain around your neck is suddenly lifting off of you. Feel the lightness once that weight has been removed. Notice the sensation of where once there was constriction and the freedom that you feel when the chain has been lifted off. And notice again how that might change the sensation in your body that you have given a form. Imagine now that that demon figure changes form and is suddenly your counterpart. That figure is actually the perfect mirror of you. Both of you sitting together in perfect union, in perfect balance with one another, both with an equal expression of masculine and feminine energy. And look within the eyes of your counterpart now and see yourself reflected. Notice this expression of attunement, compassion, acceptance, a desire to connect and a desire to create. And that the longer the two of you look within each other's eyes, the more at home you feel in this exchange. Notice a feeling of expansiveness, of infinite possibility, that comes over your consciousness. Feel what it feels like in your body to be perfectly aligned, to be perfectly balanced. Maybe there's an effervescent flow that moves through your body. Feel this tingling at the base of your neck and feel how that energy moves up and down your spine. Again, connect to your counterpart sitting in the seat before you. Feel what it feels like to come into communion with every part of yourself, to no longer be afraid that you are at the mercy of dominating experiences. And really soak into that sensation of wholeness. Notice what effect it has on your mind and your body to identify as being a unified whole. And now I want you to let the scene fade, and I want you to begin to bring your attention back to the present moment. You can wiggle your fingers and wiggle your toes. And just come back into your present sense of self. So my takeaway from pulling these cards is that the way to save the trees is to heal these disowned parts of ourselves and to continue to repair these attachment wounds that we see being enacted out in the world on one another. The more that we can heal ourselves and show up in more authentic ways out in the world, there is this ripple effect of healing. And I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to invite you to keep doing it as well. And that we have the power to end these systems of death and destruction and align ourselves with a more equal, mutually beneficial society. So I hope this was helpful. Take care.